Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. Today, we have an update with Dustin Perry, CEO of Kingfisher Metals. Kingfisher trades on the Toronto Venture under the ticker KFR. How we'll run this today is we'll get a bit of an update from Dustin on the recent acquisition, as well as the drill results from Goldrange over the summer. And then we'll open it up for Q&A. So if anyone has questions, feel free to enter them in the Q&A box at the bottom. As always, this presentation will contain forward-looking statements, which you can see right now on your screen, or you can find it on the presentation on the company's website, which has been updated today. With that out of the way, I'd like to introduce Dustin Perry. Hi, Dustin.
Hi, Deb.
Lots of exciting news to update us on today.
Yeah, we're really excited about our new acquisition. Got a lot of targets to talk about, and a lot of what we're excited about is the analog with the KSM Treaty Creek Belt, albeit with a lot better access to infrastructure. So we think this is one of the more exciting Golden Triangle plays, and we're happy that it's in our hands.
Great. Well, why don't you give us a bit of an update, and then we'll open up for Q&A.
Yep. Okay. So before I get into things, please take a look at our forward-looking statements. We're pretty hyped up on this project, so I will be making forward-looking statements. Before I get into things, though, just a quick touch on our capital structure. So we'll be adding approximately 4 million shares here this week to the basic shares outstanding. We've got around $2 million in the bank right now. Institutional ownership is still the same, maybe even up a little bit due to plethora acquiring shares on the open market over the winter. Kingfisher has 4 projects now. 3 are 100% owned, the same ones I would have discussed in the past. So Goldrange, Extol, and Tibbert. Goldrange has been our focus since we really took this company public. We've drilled 12,500 meters at Goldrange to date. Had some very encouraging early stage results, so much so that we were invited to the Roundup, AMABC Roundup Core Shack last year, and then the PDAC Core Shack this year, which really is no small feat. There's over 1,100 companies at the PDAC, and only 40 get selected to the Core Shack. That being said, we're trying to make a world-class discovery at Kingfisher, and we drilled what was the most advanced and, in our belief, the best target at Goldrange at this stage. And we did not get the market reaction we would have liked. I think part of that is related to market conditions. But in our eyes, the target got downgraded there, and we felt that we could probably find a better opportunity to make a larger discovery, which is why we made the large pivot into the Golden Triangle. Prior to this, early on in the company's life, it was a little too expensive to get in the Golden Triangle back in 2020, 2021. And that's why we looked elsewhere. But our experience really does lie in the Golden Triangle. I myself spent the bulk of 15 years in BC looking for porphyries in the I guess people call it the Golden Horseshoe now. So the Northern Quesnel terrain as well as the Sikkim terrain. But our VPX, she really is a Golden Triangle expert. She's spent over 18 years almost exclusively in the Golden Triangle. She did her master's at the Mineral Deposit Research Unit at UBC, studying the giant Mitchell deposit, which is the largest undeveloped gold system in the world. It's also one of the largest undeveloped copper systems with over 8 billion tons of copper. So with her experience there, she worked for, I think, about half a decade for Seabridge. She also worked at the Pretium predecessor Silver Standard on the Brucejack system. She really understands these systems and was able to see a large opportunity at this Highway 37 project. Additionally, her and our advisor, Charlie Gregg, both worked on the Highway 37 project in its previous names in the past. So they've been on the ground. We didn't have to do a site visit. We already knew what we were getting into. And through our due diligence, we've become more and more excited with this project and, large number of targets to test on it at I would call them deposits already that have potential for resource drilling, but also significant exploration upside. But then outside of that, across the project, there's some really glaring targets that just have not seen the drill bit yet. So this is our focus now. Our other projects are still 100% owned, so there's no outstanding commitments, just 10-year maintenance. And at Goldrange, the claims are going to be in good standing for approximately a decade once we file this year's program. So we still have the optionality on that. There's still a lot of targets to test, but for now, the focus is up in the Golden Triangle, making a big porphyry copper gold discovery. So one thing we really like about Highway 37, it's the same age mineralization. It's within 1 million years of the Mitchell zone, the Mary zone we're going to be focusing on. And it's the same footprint approximately to that area. So the clues are pointing towards the potential for a really large system. And if you're looking for porphyries in BC, KSM is the ultimate prize in terms of resource. The issue with KSM is access to infrastructure. It's quite remote, incredibly mountainous, glaciers everywhere. I believe something like 75 kilometers of tunnels are in the initial mine planning. This is basically the hurdle that nobody's been able to get over to get this thing developed. What we see at Highway 37 is access very close to the project. So within 9 kilometers of our main area of interest, you can see Highway 37, you can see the Northwest Transmission Line. And that's why we rebranded this project as the Highway 37 project. That is one of the key components preventing deposits being turned into mines in the Golden Triangle. And the opportunity here is pretty favorable, in my opinion. So just to go over briefly, porphyry copper gold deposits and epithermal deposits in BC, they stretch across BC. The ones that are mines are predominantly near accessible areas. So southern BC, Highland Valley, Copper Mountain. These are near towns. These have logging access. People have been exploring these or mining them for a very long time. But the real prizes are in the Golden Triangle. Things like the KSM and Tudor Gold. Also looking at Galore Creek. And then Red Chris and Saddle. And Saddle was recently acquired because it's also within sight of the road. Red Chris had a road going to it. So this is really the hurdle you need to overcome in the Golden Triangle. But if you have the right rocks and you're near the road, things become a lot easier. So within the Golden Triangle, there's a lot of ground in the Golden Triangle. A lot of it isn't actually favorable. You need to be within the Stikine terrain. You can see this light gray colored area here. On the eastern part here, this is the Bowser Basin. It's a post-mineral basin. There's coal in it. It's a basin that covers all mineralization, and nobody really has explored underneath it because you're looking at multi-kilometer long drill holes. So there's a good chunk of the Golden Triangle that already you can exclude from the prospectivity. Then there's parks. Then there's extensive ice sheets. Then there's other areas of post-mineral or way pre-mineral rocks that don't have the right intrusions going into it. So when I look at this, I haven't done a calculation yet, but all I can say is we own a really good chunk of the favorable ground within the Golden Triangle. So what really got us excited geologically, aside from the proximity to infrastructure, is the fact that we've got Texas Creek intrusions in the property. So these are the intrusives that are responsible for the mineralization at Brucejack, at Treaty Creek, at all the different deposits within KSM. But the other thing is scale of alteration, intensity, and evidence of known mineralization, i.e. pre-existing deposits. And we've got all of these at this belt. The other thing, which you can see a very close analog at the KSM Brucejack belt, is you have a slightly younger, and when I say slightly younger, I mean, say a couple million years on 190 million year deposit. So pretty close in the scale of mineralization, but slightly post-dating the porphyry mineralization. You get an epithermal belt at this project, very similar to what you see in the KSM belt. There's one deposit already defined here, the Hank system. It had a non-compliant resource done in the early 80s by LAC Minerals that went into Barrick. That resource, I'm not going to talk about it because it's had drill holes into it since, and nobody's done a recalculation. But there's enough drilling there and evidence of mineralization that the Hank looks like it's close to being ready for resource drilling. Williams Porphyry and Mary are the two advanced porphyries on the project, but there's many other targets throughout this area. Mary is going to be our focus this year. It looks like it really does have legs and has a huge amount of potential for finding a core, which will be a lot more copper rich. But between this gap, if you look at periodicity on the following slide, you can see these deposits often form in a line, essentially, or in a cluster, similar to VMS deposits. When you find one, there's a good chance of finding more of them. And all the clues are here on this project. One thing I'll quickly touch on is the VMS potential in this project. We don't touch on it too much, but you do have the Iskut River Formation, which is the age-equivalent volcanic rocks that host the Eskay Creek VMS deposit that Skeena is advancing. We are further north, but we are within the Eskay Rift, so potential does exist for these type of deposits. It's not something we're going to chase immediately, but the potential will be here in future years in a better market if we can throw more money at this project. So I touched on the similarities with the Brucejack KSM Treaty Creek camp. We've created a comparison slide here showing the two belts at scale. The big difference on the right is you've got these red resource bodies that have over 200 million ounces of gold. So it's the largest undeveloped gold system in the world. That's what everybody talks about. Seabridge touts itself as a gold company, but these are huge copper systems. So Mitchell is the biggest copper system in BC, 8 billion pounds of copper. And then the gold rich top of it, East Mitchell, formerly called Snowfield, has been thrust off. So you got 12 billion pounds of copper and 70 million ounces of gold in a single system, with other massive systems on either side of it. What Gail did was her master's on, she mapped the Mitchell system and noted a sub-horizontal ore geometry to many of these systems within this belt. And that's something I'm going to touch on later that's really key to an opportunity we think we can unlock on this project. But before I move on, I just want to touch on the footprint and the scale of what we're seeing here. So this on the left, you can see the scale of the Porphyry footprint, which is this more bulbous shape here. And that's 19 kilometers open-ended to the southeast or southwest, 19 kilometers long by 9 kilometers wide. So really comparable to the KSM belt. This is a huge porphyry footprint. You don't get many of these in the world, and especially in BC. And it also has that epithermal footprint as well. One thing that people might find interesting, you can see on the epithermal footprint, it's basically the last pulse of the porphyry system coming to higher levels, often structurally controlled. And at Brucejack, you can see the Brucejack fault running through here. And at Hank, you can see a pretty clear lineament stretching to the north as well. So pretty similar in many regards. And these systems are within 1 million years of each other. One big difference is the amount of drilling here. So we've had about 42,000 meters of drilling across this project, with the bulk of it, over half of it, being done at the Hank epithermal system. There's over 2.5 million meters of drilling done at the Treaty Creek belt. So, there's a lot of room for discovery at our project, but also a lot of work to get to such a large resource as this. So the first target I'm going to talk about is what we plan on drilling this year. I'll just backtrack quickly because there might be some questions on this. So the two option agreements we have completed on Origin's ground and Golden Ridge's ground. They were done separately. The Golden Ridge ground did not have a permit on it. It was expiring. It expires March 31st of this year. We were able to negotiate a much cheaper on the front end for that project. So we're only paying $75,000 this week when the TSX approval comes for the Golden Ridge ground. But there's no permit in place. So the work done on that this year will be limited to mapping, maybe some infill soil sampling, and then also likely an airborne survey. The Origin ground permit was applied for by Origin in September of last fall. We've spoken with the mines office, and we expect the permit within the month of April. So Mary is really going to be our focus this year. This is where we're going to drill test. Mary is a really sizable porphyry footprint within that much broader porphyry footprint. So these images, these tiles on the right side of this slide here, they're all in the same location with just different data layers on them. On all of these highlight zones I'm going to talk about, these slides on the right, these tiles are 6 by 6 kilometers. So really big footprint. These soil anomalies, for example, it was a 2 by 3 kilometer soil anomaly at Goldrange for people familiar with our previous maps. So these are really robust targets. What we see here is evidence of a system through drilling that does not explain the extent of the geochemical and alteration outline here and expression. So there's a section line cutting through the Mary zone, stretching to the Cliff Gosson. This Cliff Gosson here was actually mapped by one of our advisors, Charlie Gregg. He mapped a small potassic plug in there and then a broad area of phyllic alteration. So in porphyry systems, your core is going to be a potassic altered area where you get higher copper to gold ratios. And as you grade out and upwards from a system, you get into phyllic alteration, where you get generally higher gold grades. That's what we see here so far. We see much higher gold to copper ratios. They've really drilled a cap of the system. They've had little sniffs of potassic alteration in the form of dikes, but they haven't got into that large bulbous body of a porphyry where you really start building tonnage. And you get the higher copper grades, which is what we're after. So a few things to drum home here, and going back to what I mentioned about Gail's experience in the KSM belt, is that a lot of systems in that part of the world, they come in. So in the KSM belt, they come in on the Sulfuret's thrust. A thrust is a shallow angle fault. Generally, ore-bearing fluids are going to follow a plane of weakness. So these porphyries are coming up the thrust fault, and they're sub-horizontal geometry for the most part. You get the same thing at Goldstorm. And even outside of that area, we've been looking at a lot of comparables, albeit different ages. And we see the same thing at Pebble. We see the same thing in Particular Creek. We see the same thing at Red Chris. You get a lot of structurally focused mineralization creating sub-horizontal ore patterns. This is the thing that stood out to us on Mary, is these bodies appear to be dipping towards a chargeability anomaly at depth. And on the other side of the mountain, you got a kilometer thick Gossan, which also appears to be dipping in that geometry, indicating the potential for a much larger, higher tonnage system with a much higher grade copper core in the middle of this mountain here. That actually has really favorable geometry if it were to ever get developed in mind for a low strip open pit. One thing to touch on is what previous operators clearly did not have this knowledge. They were drilling this system mostly vertically, and grades started to peter out as they went through this body. But what we're seeing are arms of a system coming at depth. So this actually was an opportunity to us. The most recent drill hole here at Mary was done in 2019. It was 291 meters of 0.7 gold equivalent. It would be right here on this map here. So they're hitting gold mineralization with step outs. Copper mineralization was actually increasing in that drill hole, but it's still open undercover for expansion here. And that's what we're going to test this year. So we're going to move to the south away from the Mary zone. We're also going to test above the cliff zone, test the potassic alteration as well there, where we think it's going to grade into a larger potassic body. But this is just one part of the story at Mary. So this covers a relatively small part of this anomaly. There's Gossans that extend way out to the west, the north. There's really nice looking porphyry anomalies off this image in both directions. You've got the ME. If you look at the copper on the bottom right here, you've got an anomaly out here that was mostly sampled after these drill holes were completed. So these drill holes are I forget the exact date of them, but I believe they're over 20 years old. I think they might even be from the 80s, whereas this sampling was done in 2019. Upslope of these drill holes. And we also believe there's a sub-horizontal geometry here as well. There's a thrust fault you can clearly see in airborne imagery above the geochemical anomaly. So we believe there's a porphyry body dipping into the mountain here. Hasn't been drilled in the right orientation. Just need to swing the drill around, go above it, and test this. So it's pretty clear-cut exploration here. Although there's a lot of gaps that have a lot of information to be collected. This unsampled area on this image here, where on the copper map, it really corresponds with this steep cliff face of the Cliff Gossan. There's one soil sample in a 1,300 meter gap, and that one sample is 150 ppb gold, 0.15 gold, which is really high for a porphyry signature. So we see this as having a tremendous amount of potential. It just needs the right crew to go at it, and then you can step above this system and drill it above in the right orientation. So that's going to be our focus for this year. I'm going to touch on the two other more advanced targets now that are on the Hank claims that we won't be able to drill until 2024, but show a lot of upside for this project through its lifetime. So Williams is a pretty recent discovery. It was drilled by Golden Ridge about 5 years ago. It's an outcropping area, a really small area. They found potassic alteration coming to surface. You can see here the grades are higher in copper, so it's a higher or lower gold to copper ratio than over at Mary. So we think we're getting closer to the really heart of this system. But this system too is open-ended. It's got a large IP anomaly. If you look at the top right here, so the section line on the top left stretches through here. The top part of the section line would be the right part of this image here. So we're looking from this point on the map back here to the southwest. So above Williams or at Williams, they drilled a chargeability anomaly. This anomaly extends for over a kilometer down what we believe is the plunge of the system. So a lot of room to expand on that. And then there's actually a really deep anomaly. The IP survey doesn't show up on here. It's a different orientation and it wouldn't have worked for an image. But there's another large IP anomaly underneath the Hank, 6 by 3 kilometer epithermal footprint. So with that in mind, a large epithermal system like this at Hank, we don't think it's explained by what they've drilled at Williams. That size of a porphyry, there's no way it's creating a 6 by 3 kilometer gold system. It's not big enough to drive that big of a system. So it could be a number of things. It's either the Williams system has a lot of room to grow, or there are other porphyry systems in this area driving it. Those are things we'll test in the future. Some will require really deep holes, which we won't get to until we're in a better market and have a higher share price. But it does leave a lot of room for the discovery of large, potentially billion-ton porphyries on this project. So this is the same imagery, or same location, same section, just different annotation. On the bottom right, you've got silver now versus copper. This is to highlight the Hank epithermal system. So Hank has seen the majority of drilling on the project. It's been drilled since the 1980s. There's actually excavator trenches all over it with some test pits. They built a winter road in there back in the 1980s. Did a lot of work. Most of the drilling was focused in a small area where they defined that non-compliant resource. Those drill holes, we don't have the values displayed on here. We are not confident in them yet to display them to the market. So we've only displayed the more recent drilling. But recent drilling has done quite well. So 11.6 grams over 20 meters. These exceed the grades we drilled at Goldrange by quite a bit. 19.7 over 4 meters, but then some broader 60 meters of over 2 grams. So really encouraging grades here. I think you could move towards a resource fairly quickly here. But one big key that caught our eyes is all the historic drilling is either done to the northwest or the southeast. And you see this northeast, southwest extent to this geochemical anomaly. That might make sense. What we're seeing here, though, is alteration bodies that are stretched to the northeast, southwest that are related to basically a permeable layer embedding that mineralization has come up through a feeder and then moved out laterally. That's what most of the historic drilling here is tested. And a lot of the grades are, in the couple gram range over broad intercepts. So it's a very favorable host. But what you really want to find in the Golden Triangle is high grade. And we feel they've just nicked high grade feeders, but they haven't been drilling in the right direction. So you can see a pretty clear structure running through here, and it corresponds with the area of highest grade soils. That's near to where the highest grade intercepts have been. So future drilling by Kingfisher is going to be done perpendicular to that in a southwest northeast fashion, with the goal of hitting high grade feeder mineralization that has, two components to it. One, we might be able to put together a sizable resource, same age as Brucejack, so that potential exists. They have found BG here in the past, but finding the feeders there will also vector us towards a potential porphyry feeder where you could find a really large copper gold deposit. So that's what we're up to. There's a number of targets on here that I haven't talked about yet. We've put a slide together that really just outlines the different stages that all these different targets are at. I guess the VMS trend to the north of the project would be by far the most early stage. And then you've got the upper gold horizon within Hank, which is the closest to resource drilling, and Williams and Mary aren't too far behind. But there's quite a few other targets throughout here. And I really like looking at this in a 3D view like this, because in my mind, albeit we are at an early stage, you can really envision the potential for an actual operation coming in here. The topography will permit for roads being built off the highway, and these systems are clustered together in an area that isn't nearly as outrageous topography as say the KSM belt. So that's Highway 37. I'm going to briefly touch on what we did at Goldrange in the last year, and then we can move to questions. So drilling last year, or the last 2 years, has been focused on the cloud drifter trend. Goldrange is a 511 square kilometer project, Southwest BC. This is how we started the company. We were well liked by the market versus our share price right now. We're trading about 5 times higher for the first 6 months of trading. Went out there, drilled some really good first pass holes. Our first program drilled 73 grams over a meter. 6.9 grams over 9 meters. So really good first pass holes. Didn't do well in the market, but we felt it was justified based on those values, 75 grand meters, to go back and give it another crack. part about the way we operate as a company is we want to move quickly on a project, do everything in the right order, but really give it a thorough shake. And if we don't like what we're seeing, move on to somewhere where we think we have a better chance of making a discovery. Everything made sense in the first 2 years of drilling. We broke the 100 gram meter threshold this year, which got us into the core shack at PDAC with 2.9 grams over 40 meters. But the reaction to that, given the state of the market and given other opportunities out there, it made sense to pivot into our new project. That being said, this project is going to be in good standing for about a decade. A lot of other targets to test on it. There's a ton of exploration potential across I believe it's 43 kilometers long. So it's not going anywhere. If the market really improves and we have the means to explore both at once, that's something we might entertain. But we also might entertain bringing somebody else in on this or bending this project. Ultimately, we'll do whatever makes the most sense for our shareholders and increasing our odds of making a discovery. And if that's capital to explore at Highway 37, then so be it. That's all I've got, Deb.
Thanks for the update. I think Magda's going to start the Q&A with some questions around your new project.
Yes. So first, not to dumb everything down too much, but can you give us an overview of the metals that you're going to be exploring for at Highway 37 and how that's different from what you were exploring for at Goldrange?
Okay. So there's still, we were originally focused on high-grade gold. That potential still exists with the Hank project. So Hank there's a lot more legs to it than what we've got at Goldrange. There's already intercepts that are probably over double what we've drilled at Goldrange, and a lot more drill data and a larger footprint, and a really good analog comparable to, say, Brucejack. So I would say from that aspect, there's still exposure to that, but the real focus now is going to be on copper gold systems. We are bullish on copper as many other people, and this seemed to be a really good entry into these systems, especially utilizing our geological skills and experience in the area. So copper and gold, albeit now we're also looking at low-grade bulk tonnage deposits that have potential to be massive systems.
Thank you. And you're consolidating two projects. How come you decided to enter into options agreements on both? And going forward, do you have the option of just pursuing one versus the other?
Yeah, so they're independent agreements. They have the same share issuance schedule. So we purposefully did them so they would be at the same time for simplicity. But they're not contingent on one or the other. So we can walk from one if we want to. In my mind, it makes sense to have this all together. It's all part of the same hydrothermal system. It's all part of the same belt. It's, you could look at this as if you had Seabridge's ground and Tudor's ground. If you could get both, obviously you'd want both. if Seabridge could get Tudor's ground for $3 million in stock, I'm sure they would do that.
For sure. And what's the total cost then between the two in cash and shares?
So it's 10.5. Okay, I'll break it down right now. It's $10.5 million in work over 4 years, and it's back end loaded, and then $6.5 million in stock over the same period. So this week, when we get everything confirmed with the TSX, there'll be $300,000 worth of stock at 8.5 cents going to Origin, and $75,000 worth of stock going to Golden Ridge. Golden Ridge also has $25,000 cash payment on signing, and then in years 3 and 4, $100,000 and $125,000 in cash.
Okay. And then you've touched on roads and infrastructure. So other than the highway passing through that one end of the project, are there any other roads throughout the site?
No, it's definitely helicopter work. The reason we're excited about the road is just from a development standpoint. I think you don't need to define a multi-billion-ton porphyry here to get people really interested. And good examples would be what happened at Saddle. We see size potential for something like that already. but it is helicopter work, albeit close to a road and an actual airport, or not airport, but an airstrip, the Burge strips just off the project on the highway. That's where previous camps have been located for this. So if it grows, it's easy to do fly in, fly out from there, but it's also about a 4-hour drive from maybe 4.5 hours from Terrace, BC, where VPX works. So she'll be popping in a lot this summer. And then it's a pretty easy flight. So this is something I think a lot of retail investors might not be aware of in the Golden Triangle. Just the variability of access via helicopter is mostly helicopter work. But with that in mind, there's big variations. So at Goldrange, it was helicopter work. We were flying quite a bit further. So here we'll be about 9 to 15 kilometer flight. Goldrange, we're flying about 35 kilometers to our main area of drilling. But at Goldrange, the weather was perfect. So we didn't have a lot of standby time. In some parts of the Golden Triangle, specifically closer to the coast, so around Stewart and then really just further west within the mountains, you can have really bad weather that can really cause huge cost overruns. When you've got a helicopter on standby, you're also paying for the drill on standby, and you're paying everybody's wages, but you're not getting anything done. One benefit here is you can come up a pretty low valley and get into these zones. And I was talking with Mike Blady from Goldrange. He said they actually had no standby days. They were always able to get to the drill on the last program they were there. So it makes a big difference, but it might not show up in a deck.
For sure. And then touching on the Mary Porphyry, so you mentioned that you have a different vision of the geometry compared to like previous operators. So how would you handle that from a drilling perspective? Like, where exactly would you put the drill holes to test that?
So instead of drilling through the known mineralization deep, we'll be moving laterally. So testing strike, but then, eventually our idea would probably be that those holes will be getting deepened as you get further along strike towards the core. And there's a number of things we can do to test that, looking at the alteration in geology. You can do some spectral work with a TerraSpec instrument on the drill core to look at the clay temperatures and vector towards a higher temperature core. And really the simplest is just metal ratios. It's not that complicated. As you get towards the core of a porphyry, you get higher copper to gold.
Got it.
Which is the ultimate prize. And if you look at Red Chris, say, when they started getting towards the core and away from the outer zones towards the center of gravity, they got deeper and they got some spectacular numbers that I think are still in the top 10 porphyry drill holes ever.
Wow. Cool. And then you mentioned you're expecting drill permits next month for the Mary area. So what's the time frame that you're looking at between getting the drill permit and actually starting drilling?
So it's pretty obvious we're going to have to recapitalize prior to the drill program. One thing I'll touch on is that we can use the critical flow through component since we're looking for really a copper rich core to these systems. So we can raise it. Right now it's, I think 1.62 is the premium for charity flow through. But there's a few things we want to do before we start drilling. We're not going to do we're not planning a massive drill program this year. It's not going to be 10,000 meters. It might be more like 3,500 meters. It's going to be dependent on the capital raise. But there's a few things we need to do first. We need to get out there. We need to map a few of these areas. So Gail's going to be out there. I would expect Charlie Gregg will come out. We've engaged another mapping geologist who's worked all throughout the Golden Triangle. So we're going to solve a few questions that are going to help finalize the final tweaks on our drill targeting. We'd like to do an airborne geophysical survey. We're evaluating those options right now across the entirety of this footprint. Because there are a lot of other targets either undercover or in difficult terrain that I think it would be really illuminating. A lot of soil sampling in these gaps and prospecting in these areas. It appears to us that there's some pretty ripe targets and potentially low-hanging fruit that nobody's been to yet. There's a decent amount of drilling here, most of it on the Hank system. But it's still pretty damn early stage given what you see, like given how prospective it is. It really hasn't seen that much work.
And then switching to Williams and Hank, you said how they could be related, but they're probably not related based on the currently available information. So can you kind of elaborate on that a little bit, how one depends on the other?
Yeah. Okay. So some basic porphyry epithermal geology or science here. Porphyry systems, they come in an intrusion often into volcanic rocks, and you get an alteration system around the top of the intrusion. And then often the final gasps of the system as magma is coming up shoot off epithermal systems, which go distal, laterally and above. You can have different types of epithermal systems based on the fluids and the depth you're at. One thing, if an example in my first mineral deposit class, second year university, or maybe third year, we got to choose a deposit to study. And I remember doing a little paper on what's called Far Southeast, which is a porphyry in the Philippines and has the Lepanto high sulfidation copper gold epithermal system above it and laterally. Most porphyry systems, or pretty much all of them, would have an epithermal system above them, but they're often eroded. There's been a lot of glaciers in the Golden Triangle, so it's pretty unusual to find both intact in an area. And often maybe you're at the top of an epithermal system and it's too deep to get to the porphyry, so nobody's ever going to drill test that, or you're in the porphyry and it's been eroded. One or the other. It's rare that you get both and potential for both on a single project. What we see here is that potential. So the porphyries around, above Mary, I don't think there's a potential for an epithermal system above it, because the level of erosion is you're right at the top of the porphyry in the gold cap. So the phyllic alteration on top of it. That's good though, because it means if there is a big core to this system, it's going to be intact. Other places you might actually find the bottom of a porphyry and everything's gone. So I think we're at a really good erosional level here, which is really what the red line theory that everybody talks about in the Golden Triangle, that's really all it means. It means you're right at the right erosional level to find these systems. They haven't been gone and you're not way above them. So it's really just an erosional level thing. And then what we see at Williams is it's not a big enough porphyry in its current form to form that big of an epithermal system. You need a really large porphyry to create an epithermal system that big.
Got it.
Does that summarize it?
Yes, thank you. And then last question for me, you mentioned some blue sky targets. So can you tell us a little bit about those?
Yeah, so, we had to do our due diligence on this. We were really thorough. We started in early October, I believe, and I think we signed the final documents the first night of the Monday of PDAC. So we were spending a lot of time going through everything. We wanted to be sure, this will be dilutive and this will require capital. So we wanted to be damn sure this was putting our best foot forward. And we came to that conclusion fairly quickly. And then through the due diligence process, and then since then, we've really started to focus in on a few areas, and we're seeing a lot of opportunities, really interesting magnetic anomalies with really high open-ended gold geochemical anomalies or copper anomalies that just haven't been followed up on. Some of it's due to terrain, but as people watching would be aware, we had no problem exploring at Goldrange. I don't think we're going to have any problem exploring here. We like getting out in the bush and handling that terrain. A lot of these systems, though, they might have difficult terrain where you're going to look, but there's always a good spot to drill above them and drill down into them. So there's a lot of targets like that. There's another target, the rainbow zone, that I believe it's 90 meters of 0.8 gold, that doesn't have a lot of follow-up. So there's a lot of clues across the project and a lot of big anomalies that just haven't seen a lot of drilling yet. So most of the drilling, all the drilling really has been focused in these three areas with a couple other wildcats elsewhere.
Okay, then moving over to Goldrange. Magda, you're done, right? Okay, perfect. So how's your exploration model for Goldrange changed given the results from the latest program?
So the target at the cloud drifter trend that we focused our drilling on, our conclusion there is, there's clearly, you're on a good structure. There's a lot of gold coming into that system. It's really widely distributed. It just didn't focus that well. You either get really narrow structures, but you get a lot of kind of chaotic narrow structures when what you really needed there to form an economic body of mineralization would be a focus corridor where all those small structures get lumped into one that's maybe 10 meters wide. That would have, if that worked, we'd be laughing right now because the amount of gold going through that system is a huge amount of gold. That being said, there are other host rocks on the project. So there's potentially more favorable mafic rocks on the mafic volcanic rocks versus the sedimentary rocks that have gold showings, that have gold veins with even some of them with VG. So I still think there's a lot of potential. We call it Goldrange for a reason because there's gold everywhere there. You're on a major structure within the Yallikum fault belt or off the Yallikum structure. So it's a good spot in the Earth's crust to bring in gold. It just wasn't the right host rock to really form the right body. So I still think there's a lot of potential there. Just the other targets are at much earlier stage, and we wouldn't have been ready to drill them this year. And given the cost of capital right now, I don't think it would have made sense to go back there. I think this new acquisition with a bit more legs on it and with the copper exposure was definitely in the company's best interest.
So you don't have any work planned for Goldrange for 2023?
No, our crew is going to be fully at Highway 37. I might do what I've done in the past and go camping there for a weekend, and who knows, might find another day trip, might find another high grade gold showing. But no, we're really going to be focused on Highway 37 and making sure our targeting is dialed in before we complete the first drill program. And we're going to try to do things pretty bare bones first year on this program. So pretty skeleton crew, I guess hiring less people than we have in the past and trying to do things as low cost, even if it means the guys are getting yelled at. The guys and girls are getting yelled at by their partners for being away a little too long.
Okay. And then with 3 district scale projects already in your portfolio, are you looking to make any other changes there?
So right now, holding costs are minimal. Extol is good until the end of 2024. Tibbert requires a very modest 100,000 or so program this year, which we will complete. And then Goldrange is good for about 10 years. So there's really little commitments on these. I don't see the value in offloading them right now, but that could change very quickly if the market improves and it's something that really benefits the company. I alluded to earlier, if we are able to monetize one of these projects, potentially for cash, and able to put that in to fund in a non-dilutive fashion what we're doing at Highway 37, then that might make sense for the company. But right now, I think it's pretty good optionality having a big project like Goldrange with a lot of upside still, and not having to make a move on it, not having our back up against the wall.
Okay, makes sense. And what's your cash position currently, and what capital raising options are you considering for Highway 37?
So it's just shy of 2 million still of hard dollars. And what we've done, that's still remaining from our IPO. So we haven't actually raised any hard dollars since early 2021. We will eventually have to add a bit more hard dollars to the bank account. So flow through is the way we will go. Pretty much all the flow through we've raised to date has been charity flow through, where we actually arrange the back end buyer of that, but we also get that large premium. Part of the reason we've done that is, well, in BC, it's if you know who the shares are going to, you should pretty much always do flow through because it's non-dilutive. People run into issues when they're desperately trying to raise flow through and issuing it to people that are just taking the tax benefit and dumping the stock. That hasn't been the case for us. Most of the flow through has gone through this charity mechanism to institutions outside of Canada that actually wouldn't be able to buy standard flow through. So it's a win-win. We put it in good hands, and then we also get that tax benefit. And now with the critical flow through benefit, it's a 1.62 multiple approximately. That's what I heard most recently. So it will be around that 1.6 range, which is really good.
Great. And there was an audience question that came in. How will relationships with the local Tahltan First Nation be progressed?
So our Tibbert project sits within Tahltan territory. And since we acquired that project, we entered into a communications agreement. So that's the lowest level agreement because we weren't spending that much money there. But we're right now, we're trying to arrange, we just acquired this project. So we're moving towards having discussions with them, letting them know what we're planning. And eventually that communications agreement will evolve into an exploration agreement. given the scale of the project this year, well, there is some capacity funding requirements for these agreements. And we've been able at Tibbert to negotiate a lower fee due to the amount of work we've been doing. So the goal will be to do that until we're, doing a large program and then pay the full amount. So that's the plan.
Thanks. And what's the response been like to the Highway 37 acquisition? What have your shareholders been saying?
Yeah, so I've spoken with the institutional shareholders. They're very pleased. Just got off a call with somebody today that was really pleased and thought the move into copper was a really good move. But I was also so I was at PDAC. I didn't get to talk about it for all of PDAC. I was biting my tongue for the first couple of days. But after we got to talk about it, people were really excited about the project. Some people said, how on earth did you get this? I think, Gail's new ideas plays into that. I think also the market's been horrible and everybody's been focused on lithium, but we didn't want to change our script. We wanted to, stay the course. But then I was just in Zurich for the Swiss Mining Institute conference last week, and I would say reception was very positive. I don't think it's going to take a lot to get some big eyes on this project, especially with all of Gail's connections working for the major mining companies in the area. I think this will be really well received once we really start going at it.
Sounds good. So I don't see any other questions. Dustin, was there anything that you wanted to talk about today that we didn't cover?
No, I think just keep your eyes on this. There's a lot of potential on this project, and it's just the right fit for this company. We got the right team for the job, and we've got a commanding land position in the Golden Triangle now. Hopefully going into a big bull market, like we keep on saying, but we can't control the market. We can just control what we do and how we allocate capital. And this seems to be the best use of our capital and time.
Yeah, well, sounds like you're gearing up for an exciting summer. Magda, did you have anything else?
No, thank you, Dustin.
Thanks.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Dustin, for your time. And thanks, everyone, for participating. If anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out. Or if you'd like a one-on-one meeting, by all means, reach out. We'll set that up for you. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.